So I wanted to touch on brushes on this episode for a couple of reasons. First and foremost, I always kind of underestimated the value of having different styles of paintbrushes. I'm really particularly rough when it comes to painting, and by that I mean I'm not delicate with dipping paintbrushes in the pot. I'm always kind of right in there and slopping it on wherever I can. It's not the best way to treat your brushes, I will say that up front, but I have learned a few hints and tips and tricks from fellow painters, and obviously the more I'm progressing the hobby, the more I'm learning things as well. So I wanted to discuss the types of brushes that might be suited for you, or the reasons why so many of us painters have so many different types of brush. So what's in a brush? First of all, the shape of the brush. Maybe doesn't seem significant, but there's a huge difference from something that is flat versus a beveled kind of one for the hold and grip you have on it. It depends your style of painting, it depends your technique, it depends how comfortable you are, how near the end of the tip of the brush you need your fingers to be. So placement, it's something again that over the terms you painting, you'll get comfortable with how you hold a brush. If you're right down here, this brush is no good for you because the idea is to have you using it from there. So it's something you'll have to learn and play around with yourself. So pay attention when you're ordering brushes to the type of brush, like the indentations on the brush, if it's something that means something to you. If you're going to be spending hours and hours painting, like if you're a commission painter for example, it might be important to get something that's a bit more comfortable for you to hold. Brush size. Again, I always say it's not the size of the boat, it's the motion in the ocean. But brush size has a wee bit of importance when it comes to painting, particularly depending on whether you are doing this size of models, this size of models, or this size of models. The hint is detail. If you're doing a giant, I say giant, he's rather a big boy, a large scale model, you can get off with a multitude of different sized brushes. Something larger scale would be great for doing paneling, for example. If you're going to be dry brushing or incorporating other paint techniques, you'll need something quite chunky. There is no limit to the amount of different styles and sizes of brushes you may require for a model like this. Ultimately, when it comes to doing small details though, you want a fine detail brush. So by fine detail, I mean for doing things like the eyes, for example, on these models, you want something that's going to give you good control, a sharp point. And this is what I mean about brush quality. Now I understand respectively the price in brushes varies from being affordable to absolutely extraordinarily expensive. That again is something you're going to have to play around with. If you want a quality brush, you are probably going to have to pay for it. Not just for getting the finer tip and the point being more preserved, it's more about the lifespan of the brush. I bought a cheap set of brushes from Amazon. Initially I started off with the Citadel brand, which was great, but because like I'm saying I was quite rough with painting, my brushes were easily kind of wrecked. Now part of that is my own doing. Initially I didn't clean them properly, I didn't give them proper brush care. The points of these I found really difficult, and also what's called the fennel of the brush, so the metal part here that connects the brush handle to the tip of the brush. You really should try and avoid putting paint in that at all costs. I am the world's worst for, I want to say forgetting that, but just not adhering to that. I am terrible. As you can probably tell from most of these, they're still coated. That's why they're ruined, okay? In future, I do try to use just the end of the brush when I'm dipping in paint pots so that it's not gone as deep as the fennel, because when you get paint in there, that's ultimately what frays and destroys the bristle part of your brush and prevents it from keeping a point. So, cheap brushes from Amazon, yes, did the trick. I got a lot for good value for money. They're lovely scale, lovely size. Some of these are great to work with, particularly for doing washes over models, but the lifespan of them is awful. I am trying to be more on top of brush care, so using a brush cleaner, which I highly recommend for the very start. If you want to preserve the life expectancy of your brushes, invest in something like this. I use the Masters brush cleaner again, which you can pick up on Amazon. So it's just like a brush soap, it lasts ages. And the idea is when you are cleaning out your brush, so dip it in the water, dip it in your soap, just as so. Get a bit of kitchen roll, preferably a clean one, and you just gently stroke it like that and use the inside of your hand to kind of just bring the point of your brush back to shape like that. You want to leave a tiny bit of soap residue on it to preserve the shape of the brush, keep the point, and then when you put your brush away and come back to it, you know, it's still there. It's just a case of maybe dipping it in the water again to loosen the slightly hardened soap that's dried in, but at least it's preserved the shape and point of your brush. When it comes to brush storage, again, it's very important that you actually store your brushes horizontal and not vertical. Rookie mistake, I used to have a giant cup. I thought it was the coolest thing ever. It was a Game of Thrones mug. I used to just grab all my brushes and have them sitting upright like that, almost like in a jar pot type thing. No, not a good idea, because when you wash your brushes, again, there will be plenty water still at the tip of the brush, even if you drop it against the kitchen roll. And when that trickles inside the fennel, that's what dries out that part and ruins the brush tip as well. So you want them to dry that way so it doesn't corrode the bit or ruin the wood bit, ruin the brush tip. Keeping up with me so far? Most brushes will have a purpose as well. As much as the size is important, or arguably is it important, it's the type of brush. The brush hair itself will be made from all different kinds of materials. You get synthetic, you get horsehair. There is endless amounts of different materials there for the type of brush you want to use. Again, if affordability is an issue, don't shy away from getting something that's still durable and affordable for you. Feel comfortable to branch out to different companies, try different things until you get something that works and fits for you. Now, most of these brushes are just like what I call standard paint brushes, which can be used for your paint, your shades, whatever you like. A dry brush is a different type of brush, as in it's designed to have a harder type and more coarser type of hair at the end, okay? Because these are designed for a different paint technique on your model. Again, I am terrible for taking care of these, but the Citadel dry brushes are good for if you want to give like a nice overall dry brush coating of your model, for things like to give it a silver shine or a gleam for like the highlighted points. But I have recently learned, if you're doing a larger scale dry brushed model, so for example the Necrons are a great example of this. These Necron models, I prime them black and then dry brush the Rune Lord brass on it. So I'm not painting it on like standard painting, I am dry brushing to get that metallic shiny effect. It leaves a lot of darkened recesses. Large scale makeup brushes are fantastic. So again, makeup brushes can be sought for so many different stores. They're relatively cheap and they have a great way of allowing you to get good coverage on your model. So I use old makeup brushes to do models like this, even that size of brush on this model, because it's half the time doing the job and you get a fair coverage because it's a softer bristle than the dry brush ones you would get from Citadel, for example. I've also recently discovered, thanks to someone who purchased these for me as a gift on my Amazon wish list, the Army Painter branded dry brushing brushes like this. It's called the Mighty Dry Brush. Comes in 3 different sizes. This is fantastic for a more focused area of dry brushing. Now, I just used these recently and I was blown away at the difference in quality from these versus the Citadel branded dry brushes. Okay? So again, it's a different type of material in the heads of them. They're a different shape. These are quite square tipped. These are round tipped. So depending on the type of model, depending on the type of effect you're looking for, will determine the type of brush that's right for you. The great thing about this hobby is there is no wrong or right way to do this. It's only your way. So get experimental, try out different things. You will have a unique style of painting for you anyways. It's going to be different from other people. So it doesn't matter how many tutorials you watch, you'll fall into a comfort or a swing of painting in a certain style that suits you, and your brushes should reflect that. So I've got a pile of brushes here, but between you and me, I always go back to the same ones and use them repeatedly because that's the ones I'm most comfortable with. I suspect it's probably the same for a lot of you out there. So just shop around. Remember that to what kind of model you're going for. You know, if you're going for a larger scale model, try and treat yourself to brushes that are suited for that. If it's a model that has lots of tiny detail, or you want to do something like I hand drew all these decals with a paintbrush, so it needed to be thinner obviously for more brush control. Something like that is what you would need to look into. Treat yourself to a good detailed brush. Brush care requires brush soap, so something like this, very handy. Just get in the habit of doing it to your brushes after every paint job. And yeah, I think that kind of covers off brushes. What else can we discuss? Let's cover off some painting techniques then.